We do our best thinking when we are alone, but we build our best ideas when we're together. So I think the top people, they look at it as it's not about how hard you work, it's how much you contribute. That's the big difference. And in the age of AI,
Lisa, welcome back to the show. It's absolutely amazing to see you again. I'm very
oh,
excited for an amazing conversation.
hey, me too. Good. It's good to see you again.
On page 59 of your book,
Mm,
you said, "Today more than ever, people don't want a paycheck. They want meaningful work and the chance to make a good living."
mm.
What does this statement mean to you?
Did I say that? That's no.
I guess you wrote it. I guess you wrote it, right?
Uh, it's so funny because I sometimes can't even remember what's in the book anymore. So, yeah, the whole thing about meaningful work was really important to me when I was writing the book because what I was finding is, it was different when I started in work, which was it was very much more command and control. Like you worked, you were loyal, the harder you worked, the more you were rewarded. And that's not the case anymore. So it's not about how hard you work, it's who contributes the most. And what that means is they'll work very, very hard if they feel like they're contributing to something meaningful, right? It's more than just a salary. And I think that's what a lot of people are discovering is leaders are saying, I've got to define what meaningful work is. I've got to minimize the work that doesn't matter because if they don't get rid of it, people leave. They know that they're going to make more money if they hop to a different job. So unless the meaning is really strong, they're gone.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was gonna say, when you mentioned the command and control aspect, I remember last episode we were talking as well about the idea that people will work very hard for something that they're passionate about. So I wanted to ask you, as somebody who goes into a place, talks to employers, I think it's easy as an employee. Like, let's say for me, I'm leaving college soon, right? If I go into the workforce, it's easy for me to say I want to feel appreciated. But for a company, it might be harder to like see the ROI of that, right? Like you go into a company. I know your big thing, Lisa, is reducing things for complexity, right? So
Hmm.
there's things you can reduce as far as systems to make, I guess, your employers or the higher ups say like, okay, productivity improved 60%. That's easy to track. But when it comes to like the morale of employees and
Mhm.
being able to be happy in a workplace, how do you go about, like, I guess, including that in your pitch and making employers see that it's an important aspect?
Well, there's a lot of studies about employee engagement and, how that translates into well-being, mental health, happiness, retention. And so, most large companies have employee engagement surveys every year that they put a lot of weight on. And, if employees aren't engaged, that's a sign of an unhealthy company, an unhealthy culture. Because if all you do is measure productivity, I'm sure a lot of companies would be healthy, but there's more measures than just that.
Mm.
So that is something that is studied and measured. But what we're finding is that it's not about comfort, right? It's not just about that I get to feel comfortable and safe at work, like psychological safety. It's that I have opportunities for meaning, impact, and growth. And so those are the kinds of questions that they ask in the employee engagement surveys. Not, are you happy at work? I mean, because that's kind of a vague thing to ask, but do you feel like you matter? Do you feel like you're contributing? Do you feel like you're making an impact? Do you feel like your outcomes are recognized? Those are the kinds of things that they're measuring in terms of engagement and happiness. And they found that those mean more to people even than salary.
I love that. I think the idea of psychological safety, meaning, and growth is huge, especially psychological safety. I can imagine how if you work at a company that I don't know, maybe has a history of, being bad for whatever reason, maybe firing people. It's hard to feel like you can contribute to something meaningful when you don't know if you're gonna have your job tomorrow.
True. It's interesting. There's like this base level, as humans, they want to have safety, right? And that's like our what they say with our lizard brain. Everyone wants to feel safe, like they're not going to be attacked and they're not going to be eaten, that kind of thing. And that's at work, they don't want to be fired. But even once they get past that, because a lot of people aren't just thinking they're going to get fired, they just don't know where they stand. Am I going to grow
Mm,
here? Do I make a difference? And it's funny when you look at cultures, most people think that the worst thing is a company with a bad culture. And I would argue that's not true. It's a company that just has a mediocre culture. Like I like to
okay.
say, it's really easy to see a company that has, like the light bulb. They're the good culture, or the stick of dynamite. They're the bad culture. But the one that most people are in is the one in the middle, and it's like a dimmer switch where they stay there. It kind of sucks, but it's okay. And then the dimmer switch starts to come up, and it takes a long time, and they've wasted a lot of their years before they realize This really sucks. I'm not going anywhere. Mediocrity is just what everyone tolerates way too long. And at least if you're in a bad culture, you'll leave sooner and not invest so much time. But in a mediocre one, where people are afraid to be honest and not being direct and not really invested in your growth because they just want to keep you comfortable, I think that's the most dangerous place to be. And most people don't think like that. They think safe is nice, and it's not.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you kind of mentioned that it's easy to see the good from the bad as far as culture, but for the people that might be looking into companies or working in a company, how can they distinguish if a company is in that mid range to where it's kind of like not good but not bad?
You're going to hear that we have a culture of nice.
Mm,
And I would say that's not always good because when someone says they have a culture of nice, to me, that means they avoid making decisions and they
interesting.
tolerate mediocrity. And not everybody's a top performer, but I think what happens is that if you really want to be a great company, you can't tolerate mediocrity because your top performers leave. Mediocre will stay, but your top performers leave. And top performers don't like hanging around with mediocre performers for very long. And so cultures of nice keep a lot of people happy, but they don't grow. They're not successful. You're not necessarily proud to work there. You're just comfortable working there. So I would look for a culture of nice and I would look for how much mediocrity there is. Like people aren't bad, but they're really not great and you're not going to learn from them either. I think that's the majority of what you're going to find. And you need to not get too comfortable with that.
Okay, sure. So you argue that people that might be in this mid range and mediocre might be, I guess not argue because you've had the experience, but they're malignant to the company.
Yes, I think that's a really great way to say it. Is that, there's a lot of people that will tell you that have been in companies too long. The worst thing is, it's easy to identify the terrible performers. Everyone knows who they are, but we tolerate the mediocre. We let them go on too long. We promote them to someone else's group just to get rid of them because we don't want to feel bad and give them the hard review because then they get mad. Or it's going to be too hard because we got to put them on a performance review plan and that's a lot of work for me. So we tolerate it. Not because
Mhm,
we like the person, but because the process is too hard to get rid of them. It's too uncomfortable. So I think, if you really want to succeed, especially you who's like an entrepreneur and some of your listeners, when you start to see that much tolerance for mediocrity and that much avoidance of decision making and that much embracing people being comfortable versus growing, that's a pink flag. That's when you should really leave because you deserve better than that.
mm. That's an interesting statement. So as somebody who has the experience to know how cultures are good and bad, I assume that a lot of the work is extremely important as well because it keeps the company going. So from
Mm.
all of your experience, Lisa, if you could redesign the modern workday to be as I'm not gonna say I don't think productive is the best word, but to be able to get the most out of the day without burning out in the least complex way, how would you do it?
So to me, it's all about it's about intent. How do you use your time with intent? Because most of us aren't really focusing on our goals and our priorities during the day. We get our time hijacked by the unplanned, the unnecessary, the context switching. So we
Yeah.
can't really move forward. All we're doing is really executing our calendar. That's what most people spend their day doing is executing their calendar. And they give away their time quite freely. So getting through your day isn't a badge of honor. It's just that you got through all your meetings. So if I was to redesign work, and I do this with clients, my company, so I can say this with confidence, you have to have time for deep work, to focus and to think. Thinking is a daring act in most companies, right? If you're not doing, you're lazy.
Yeah.
But yet everyone says they want more time to think. So it's just this weird bipolar approach. So I would design your day where you give people that you force them to block time. And I
Okay.
mean chunks of time, 2 hours, 3 hours. I say half days. And for me, my half day is in the morning. For other people, it's in the afternoon. But what I do is I get all my stuff that's stressing me out off my to do list. And then I tackle big projects that I'm avoiding or that I don't have time to think. And then I push all my other meetings to the afternoon. So, what would I say? I would say that you need to have a boss that mandates deep thinking time, allows people to put it on their calendars when they want to. Because some of my people, if I told them it had to be in the morning, it wouldn't work. And force them to really think about what they say yes to and they say no to, and to lean more on saying no to things, not yes to everything. So those are kind of ground rules, but the idea is taking control of your calendar so you have more time to focus. Very rarely do people have that.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that's been kind of cool with having the podcast with obviously it's just me running it. It gives me time to when I have, cool guests like you and Lisa, I'm able to think about how I want to take the conversation, where I want to take it. And if I was so like busy, so in my head about the small nuances, it kind of wouldn't allow me to think. And I think that's something that I hear so many times. Like I read a lot of books, so I hear the idea that you have to take a step back to think in order to be more productive, which sounds counterintuitive because people assume like, okay, you need 1 hour of work out of this employee, and that's going to contribute more than somebody who takes 1 hour of thinking. Because I feel like, and disagree with me if you're wrong. Do
Yeah.
you think that it's hard to sell the idea because employers have a hard time understanding the benefit of people just thinking?
Yes, because they can't quantify the output.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it's not like,
It's a good way of
there's
putting it.
they can't quantify the output of it. Like they're just kind of betting that that thinking will magically happen. But we know it's kind of like investing in innovation and creativity. You can't just bring people into a room like most people do, have a meeting and go, "Who's got an idea?" Most of the ideas suck because no one's had time to think. No
That's
one's even
interesting.
even thought about asking the right questions. So if it's funny when do a lot of keynotes, and I was actually just with NBC last week, NBC and Universal Studios, and asked them a question of, "What do you spend your day doing?" And most people spend their day in meetings and emails. And I then asked them a question, "When and where do you do your best thinking?" And have I asked you this before?
No,
Okay, well, where do you do your best thinking, or when do you do your best thinking? What
well,
comes
that's a
to
good
mind?
question. I would say either when I'm on a walk or maybe in my room.
Right. Okay, so it's either a place or like an activity you're doing.
Sure. Yeah.
So the most common answers you'll get are exactly like that. Yeah, a lot of people say shower, falling asleep, getting up in the morning, working out, in the car, um, golfing. I mean, they'll say all kinds of things. For me, it's in the morning, early morning, when I'm drinking coffee because I like to write. It doesn't matter what it is, but the key themes are this. It's usually when you're alone, not in a meeting, when it's quiet, not when people are talking, and never do they say at work. They never say, "I do my best thinking at work." So the idea is we do our best thinking when we are alone, but we build our best ideas when we're together. So if you don't build in time to think,
Oh, I like that.
you will not be able to innovate. So simplifying and having time for deep thinking is critical for growth and success personally and in the office. Otherwise, you're just going to get together and you're going to have those crappy brainstorms where no one comes up with an original idea because they haven't had time to think.
Mm. I find it so interesting that you mentioned that people said, something like going on a walk, showering, falling asleep, because
Mhm.
it has to do, in my opinion, with the principle of not having something in your way. So, for example, if I go on a walk and I listen to music, I'm not going to be able to think about anything because I'm listening to music, right? But
Right.
it seems like it's crazy how many ideas your brain has when you're not stimulated, right? So it's kind of an inspirational point you brought up because anybody can get these ideas, but it feels like everybody's blocking it out. Like they're doing it without knowing about it. They're listening to music, they're walking around, whatever it is.
Keeping busy.
Exactly,
If I'm
exactly.
not doing, I'm lazy. That's the thing. So it's funny because I'll go on a walk and then I'll listen to an audio book, like a podcast or an audiobook or I don't know, something, music. Because I got to feel like I'm doing something, not just
That's
walking.
so yes, yes.
But then, or when I'm on a plane, like I'm doing my email or I'm listening to music. But the best times are when I'm just staring out the window.
Mm.
And what happens, obviously, is that your mind starts to wander. There's a really great technique that creatives use and screenwriters use, and it's called morning pages. Have you heard about morning pages before?
Never, never.
Okay. So morning pages is actually a technique that was started in the 80s, and then it really got resurrected during COVID. And it's from a concept called the artist's way. And believe me, like all of Hollywood knows this, but the concept of morning pages is that every morning you get into a routine where you must write 3 pages of anything. You can just write down, your name over and over and over again for 3 pages. But what happens is it's kind of like if you have a journal or something. You start just writing what's ever on your mind, and suddenly what comes out is your ideas, your problems, what's really on your mind, how you might be able to solve it. And your mind unearths things that you really need to focus on that you didn't realize you did. It's kind of like writing
Mm.
therapy, and a lot of writers do that to get unblocked. That is a really healthy thing for people to do when they need to come up with a new idea or a new solution because you're not listening to music and you're not distracted. You're forcing your mind to put something on the page.
Do you think that, because you mentioned the morning pages, do you think that sometimes it's less about having to do the deep thinking to get to this idea, quote unquote, and it's more about having to unwind because you said they write the 3
Yeah.
pages to kinda get the rust off?
Yeah, it is. It's like no rust. You want to get it off your brain. And it's funny because we don't give ourselves any time to do that because we think in terms of building as being important. And one of the things I like to say that's important as a individual contributor, but also as a leader, is to sculpt. And so start
Mm.
thinking of yourself as a sculptor, not a builder, because builders just keep adding on more. And we never get rid of the things that aren't working. Sculptors are really good because what they do is they get rid of the things to unearth the masterpiece that's inside. So you can focus on what's important, not everything being important. And that's a core principle of leadership, which is subtracting is just as important as adding. And we don't think of it that way. No one teaches that that I know of. So being a sculptor is a really great way for you to think of yourself as you grow into your career.
That's such an amazing example. I actually forgot to tell you, Lisa, but thanks to your book, I did some processes with my podcast that made it more simple, and I was like, "This is what I needed." And the problem, like the thing that was the hardest thing for me is I feel like I'm so emotional about my podcast. I'm so into it that it's kind of harder for me sometimes to be able to see these issues and fix them.
That's very true because the closer we are to a problem, the harder it is for us to fix it. I don't know if you've heard of that principle before.
Never. No, that's awesome. You mentioned the idea of sculpting, which I thought was very interesting, and it seems like that's something that a lot of the top leaders could benefit from. But in your experience, how do you think that the top leaders view work different than everybody else?
The top leaders, right. Well, they do think in terms of sculpting because
Okay.
they realize that focus and prioritization decision making is important because of speed. That's really what they want. They know that they need to move faster because change isn't new, it's the pace of it that's new. That's really what
Mm,
it is. And so in order to do that, they have to be able to let people have more control over their time and give them not just the agency to control their time, but the mandate to control their time. That's
interesting.
different, by the way. Because I can say you have permission to control your time, but if you're afraid or you don't know how to do it, you're not going to do it. So if I force you to do it, I might force you to do a good thing, right? It's like eat your vegetables, control your time. So I think the top people, they look at it as it's not about how hard you work, it's how much you contribute. That's the big difference. And in the age of AI, that's really is what is going to be the difference. Like I was saying before, it was command and control. When I started working, it was about showing up, coming in early, working late, how many hours you were there. That no longer matters because AI takes away all the routine work and it leaves the thinking work to us. And that's not an hourly thing, that's an output thing. So the people that will win in the future, first of all, they embrace AI, they embrace technology, just like you embrace the internet. Can you imagine somebody saying, resisting the internet and still not using it?
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but no one's gonna hire you, right? So don't be dumb. But same thing with AI. You gotta embrace it, but then the goal isn't to give everything to AI to do. The goal is to give AI everything mundane to do so you can do the meaningful work. And so that's not about hours, that's about output. And that's different. So your job is to have who contributes the most output, not who works the hardest. It's different.
Yeah, that's an
That's what
interesting.
leaders want. They like, I don't care how many hours you work. I don't. But I wanna know how much you get done. I wanna know what the output is. And if you can do it all in 1 hour, God bless. I'll promote you. Hmm.
That's I guess that brings me on to something else. So as somebody who's in this position where, let's say you are hiring somebody, what are some things you look for, especially now? Like for somebody like me, I'm younger, I'm trying to find jobs. How can I stand out?
Drive. I mean, I have to say for me, it's drive. 100%. Like, I want somebody who's driven. One, they like the mission and not in a bullshit kind of way. They're in on the mission, but they have drive. And what that means to me is they're proactive, they have agency, um, they're more ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, right? They don't have to get approval for every little thing because that's timid. I want someone that's a driver, not a doer. And there's a difference, right? There's a lot of people that are doers, but that means they have to be told what to do. But drivers, those are the people that you want on your team, and those are the people that are always going to get the raise. Bosses want drivers. So that's what I look for. You have agency, you're in it to win it. If you're a driver, I'm psyched.
Sure. Well, I don't wanna sell myself to you, Lisa, but I did get my license a couple years ago, so I've been a driver for a couple of years now.
Well, too bad because if you live in New York, nobody cares. No one gets their license in New York. So,
That's
yeah,
true, and
they
trust me,
don't
in
care.
Chicago, people
Yeah,
can't drive either.
yeah,
But
that's right.
that's awesome. I think it's huge. That's one thing that I've been trying to prioritize as well is, like, I see a lot of people around me, if this gives you any insight into the college people, I'm sure you already understand with your kids, but, like, a lot of people seem to just be doing things for the title or doing things, like, for vanity just because they wanna look good, but for me,
Yeah,
even with
I
this
get it.
podcast yeah, and I totally understand it as well, but for me, it's kinda been nice to have this podcast because it took a while to get it off and running, so it's been a good lesson to, like, not worry so much about the metrics right away and just, like, believe in the mission.
I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, especially, like, you want the title, you want the drive, and I get that, right? Because the title then brings the money, then brings the promotion, and
Yeah.
and there's prestige in that, and there's makes you feel good. But what I think happens as an entrepreneur, and I know you are like this too, is um, they feel like they are doing the right thing, but they're not doing the hard thing. And
Mm,
the people that really get ahead invest early in the hard things. So, for example, um, it's easy to, suck up to your boss and do all this and get a raise and do the things that are visible. But the people that are really going to last the longest, like you know how long it takes to build a podcast? You know how hard it is, right? To build a website, to build a business. And while everyone else is chasing the shiny things, you're doing the hard things. And the shiny things wear off. And the hard things, suddenly people look back and they're like, oh man, it's too late for me to start a podcast. Everyone else already has 100 episodes. Well, guess what? You're going to be one of those people that has 100 episodes.
yeah,
And then they can't catch up. It's too hard. So I think again, like people that have drive and they go for the output, not just the hours, those are the people that will win in the long term. I guarantee it. And it sucks at first because you think everyone else is going after these shiny things, like
yeah,
kind of like influencers online, whereas you're doing the hard thing, but it catches up soon. And suddenly people can't catch up to the hard things. They can't.
mm. Well, I appreciate those words, that's awesome, it's nice to hear that coming from you. So, you mentioned people are doing the right thing as opposed to doing the hard thing, but for those people that might be doing the right thing right now, what advice would you have for them to find out what that hard thing for them is, or do you think they already know?
No, I don't think everybody knows because I don't think a lot of people think about what they want. They just think
Sure,
about what everybody tells them they're supposed to do. So, one, defining what you want and meaningful work is really important. And most people don't think about that. I think it's okay to experiment with lots of different things. Like when I say do the hard thing means trying things. And a lot of people don't try things because they're like, I'm really busy doing this thing that everybody says I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't need to try building a podcast or writing a book. But later, as life gets busier, it gets harder and harder and harder for them to do the hard thing versus the right thing. And the right thing, by the way, is what everyone else tells you is right, not what you think
sure,
is right. And those are different. So the more introspective you can be and more experimenting you can be, and especially while you have a time when you're younger to do the hard things. I mean, it's like working out, right? I mean, sure, it's very easy for you to do one thing right. Like you can just work on arms, I don't know, or abs or whatever. But to really be able to do the hard thing and work on everything with discipline, it's going to be harder for people to catch up later versus you that's doing it now. It is. They don't
yeah.
realize it, but it's like most people, they don't realize it till it's too late.
Oh, yeah, that's yeah, that's interesting, very unfortunate,
It is,
um,
but that's the way that's the way it is. I mean, you gotta say, like, there's a reason for YOLO, like, people really are like, "If not now, when?" That's really the phrase, "If not now, when?" And believe me, it's never gonna be later. It's
yeah,
never gonna be later. There's always something else that comes up. So, I think you're smart to, like what you're doing, do it now because that's like a flywheel. That just kind of exponentially helps you later versus trying to catch up. There's a
sure.
million other people that do the right thing, but there's very few that do the hard thing.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's a good book. I just started reading. I can't talk too much about it, but I just started listening actually to the audiobook. And one of the interesting principles is like a lot of people ask, how can I do this thing? But I mean, the book argues it's important to also ask, who can help me do this thing, right? And the way that I think about it is he talked about
Interesting.
efficacy and being able to get, I guess, faster results than other people with less work. So for example, it's cool to like have this podcast because I have, people like you that I can always be like, "Hey Lisa, I'm having trouble with XYZ. Do you mind helping me?" And you could steer me away from years of bad experiences just because of one piece of advice you had, right? So in the same way that you think we just had that conversation, I think it's important to understand the person who's doing the hard thing, at least the way that I see it. I could be a little biased because I'm trying to do this thing right now, but it's very hard right now, especially the doubt is like it's always there, right? But the thing is, in the future, I might be like, okay, I want to take my podcast this way, and I'll think like, oh wait, I had this one guest, and it was Lisa, and she was super nice, and I'll ask for her advice, and maybe she can point me into the right direction instead of me spending 2 years on my own having to learn this hard lesson.
Well, and that's interesting because, like, you're doing the hard thing. It's amazing. Sometimes the hard thing isn't that hard, by the way. It's just having the guts to do it.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right? So, like, really, is it that hard to pick up the phone and call someone? No, it's just but the fear is the hard thing, right? So and then once you get used to it, it's easy. I'm sure you have a lot of friends that are like, "How did you do that?" And you're like, "I just did it."
That's yes. Oh my god, that's literally my answer every time. Every time.
Right? That's what I mean. It's like everyone looks at you like, "How did you do that?" And I think what they're saying, like, "How'd you get the idea? How'd you find the time? How'd you figure out the steps?" And, the best way to start is to start. I mean, like, that's
Yes.
really what it is. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes, like, thinking is important, but the minute, like, thinking is holding you back from the actual just doing, that's a problem.
Yeah, I
Like,
have a
you
whiteboard
start.
over here. It's hard for I mean, you can't see it, but one of the quotes I've written on it is action must precede action. That's a law of nature. Nothing starts itself. So I always kind of use that to help me get going. It's interesting.
That's exactly right. Like, I told you the frog story before?
Yeah.
Did I tell you this?
But repeat it, repeat it.
Okay, sorry. The frog story about there's 10 frogs on a log and one of them decides to jump into the water. And then you ask, well, how many frogs are left in the log? And the answer is there's still 10 because deciding to jump in and actually doing it are two different things. And I
That's
think a lot of
hilarious. Yeah.
people talk, right? They're always like, oh, I'm going to do that. Like if I could tell you the number of times, I mean, it's got to be in the hundreds. People have wanted to take me out for coffee, or I've done a phone call about like, tell me how you started a business, or how do you write a book, or how do you get started as a speaker? And they're like, because I'm going to do that. And I literally can give them the playbook, the network, the help and the advice. 99% of those people never do it, even though they have all the information right there
Yeah.
because they just can't jump in. They can't do it. They look at the water, but they'll never dive in. And so that's what I mean by doers versus drivers. Like if someone has to handhold you, no thanks. I don't want to have someone that I have to constantly push into the water. I want someone who's going to dive in. And those are different people.
Yeah. I love that so much. I think, yeah, people, I've noticed that as well, especially with people my age, they have a hard time starting things. And same exact thing. That's so funny you mentioned because word by word, people ask me, how'd you start the podcast? And I tell them, I'm like, I remember I just got out of my bed, I made the name, and I made the logo, and then from there, it just kinda happened. Like, it's such a simple explanation, but it's hard to understand, you
Yeah,
know?
that's like when someone says, how did you get to where you are?" I mean, like, I think so much of life is like happy accidents, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, 100%.
I call it strategic luck, but, like, it's it is a strategic luck like this got me to this because if I hadn't done this, I wouldn't have met you, and I wouldn't have done this, and I wouldn't like it's all connected, but, everyone thinks it has to be a straight line. It's never a straight line. It's just
Yeah.
never so go with it. Like, let's say your podcast didn't take off, then you could change it, or maybe people didn't like the name. You can change it. I mean,
Yes.
it's cool.
Yeah.
Fine.
That's something I totally think in the long term as well, people forget. So for me, I remember when I was, publishing my book, I had my, like, public launch on November 15th, but then exactly a week after, I had my launch of my audiobook, and I'm like, "You know what? Nobody's gonna remember this. I'm gonna do it. There's no reason for me to push it back another week because I already pushed it back." So it's like, if you think about things in the long term, everybody forgets what you're doing. Nobody remembers that you changed your name. Nobody remembers you failed this thing. So it's kind
No,
of it
no.
always keeps me going.
Yeah, I mean, in a good way, no one's thinking about you.
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
in a bad way. People aren't thinking about it. So you gotta,
yeah.
like, constantly make the noise, but also remember, like, you know what? You're probably thinking about it a lot more than other people are, so don't worry about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Lisa, my last question to you. You talked a little bit about this because you mentioned how leaders look for people that are sculptors, and you mentioned you look for people that are driven. But somebody listening to this wants to future proof their career. What should they stop doing and what should they double down on?
Well, they should definitely double down on being the problem solver. Like, if you are the doer and the problem solver, like, that is what people want. Really, like, if you're a boss, they are looking for people that can just help them. That's really what it is.
Sure.
So I would double down on that. But I think the stop doing is, how do I wanna say this? When you're gonna get into the work world, you're gonna start saying yes to everything, and you're gonna burn yourself out.
Hmm.
Right? It doesn't matter if you're doing everything right if you're not doing the right things. That's the difference. And so it doesn't matter if you're doing everything right. I'm doing everything right. But yeah, but if you're doing all the wrong things, like I'm going to every meeting and I'm so great in all the meetings. Well, should you be in the meetings?
Mm.
So I think that's the constantly asking yourself the question of, is this meaningful? Is this getting me to my goal? Because it allows you to say no more than yes. I'm a big believer in making sure you say no so you can do things with intent. Not don't say yes to everything.
Lisa, it has been another amazing 30 minutes. I appreciate you joining me. Where can people
Thank
find you?
you. Well, you can find me a couple places. Go to lisabodell.com. I just got my website up there. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to my company, which is futurethink.com. So come check it out. There's lots of free resources there for people that are just starting out. And if it helps them, great. That's what it's about.
For my listeners, thank you everybody for listening all the way, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.